Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, then this podcast is for you. So let's get out of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. If you've ever driven through Michigan during their most prominent season of the year, construction, you'll know that it's a good idea to leave a little extra room for error in your itinerary in case delays occur. So on today's episode of Equipped in Grace, I'd like to share something I learned about leaving room for error when driving, but also in leaving that same margin for the people in our lives. Let's start with a little drive through the Great Lakes State. A while back, my wife and I were headed to a wedding rehearsal near Frankenmuth, Michigan. And though we hadn't exactly left late, we were cutting it a little close for how long it usually takes to make that trip. I was initially hopeful when I plugged in the coordinates to the GPS, and it said we'd be on time. In fact, 5 minutes early. However, as we hit the interstate, the estimated arrival time suddenly jumped from 20, 30 to 40 to 55 minutes late. The strange part was that the roads around us were clear. No traffic jams, no emergency sirens. It wasn't until we were an hour into Michigan that we encountered the issues long anticipated by the map app. You see, in addition to being construction season, it had also been a stormy morning in central Michigan, and it resulted in, I'm sorry to say, more than one auto accident, thus clogging the already reduced lanes. Now, I can't recall exactly how late we arrived to the wedding rehearsal, but let's just say if it were a football game, we definitely showed up in the fourth quarter. So while we didn't technically leave late, we definitely left no room for error. Now, leaving a little room for error probably seems like common sense to most of us, but it got me thinking. Not only do I cut it close with my travel times to work and on road trips, but often I also cut short the people in my life. Let me explain. In Ephesians 4:2, Paul instructs his readers to, quote, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults, because of your love. The words making allowance for are interesting to me because they get translated many different ways. Some versions put it as bearing with one another. Others say support each other or show tolerance for, or as one version bluntly states it, put up with each other. It seems to me that all of these are good ways to translate this verse and can be relevant at any given moment, but I particularly like the idea of making allowance for one another. It seems to indicate that a little pre-planning is necessary to frame our minds in a way that allows for the people around us to be less than perfect. Leave them a little room for error. Let's back this up with a little more scripture, shall we? Jesus uses a lot of the kingdom of heaven is like phrases during his ministry on earth. And often that phrase is followed by an analogy about heaven being like something very small that grows into and changes the area around it. He'll say the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which is a very small seed that grows into a very large plant. It's an invasive species, as a matter of fact. Or he'll say the kingdom of heaven is like yeast hidden in dough. Again, a small substance that has the power to change the composition of its surrounding environment. I mention these analogies because although Jesus teaches the kingdom of heaven is to take over and invade every part of our life, our behavior, our attitude, our treatment of others, it may not happen all at once. It takes time for a seed to become a tree or for yeast to make dough rise so it can be baked. Likewise, it takes time for God to work out the kinks in our own character as we trust him to do so. And it's probably worth mentioning, he doesn't start in the same place with all of us. In fact, it's kind of like remodeling a kitchen. Some of us may start with the floors, others may choose to update the appliances or maybe the cabinets. It all needs to change over time, but the starting point will vary based on the condition of your kitchen and your relationship with the architect. I think this is why Jesus teaches the following lesson in Matthew 7, 1-6. Don't judge so that you won't be judged. For you will be judged by the same standard with which you use on others, and you'll be measured by the same measure you use. Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but don't notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the splinter out of your eye, and look, there's a beam of wood in yours? Hypocrite! First take the beam of wood out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the splinter of wood out of your brother's eye. Now, to be clear, I don't think Jesus is talking about not holding people accountable for their actions, as this verse is sometimes used to do so. That's a lesson for another time. I think what Jesus is saying here, though, is that we don't always know what's happening in someone else's kitchen. Think of it this way. You wouldn't give advice to someone on how to redo their kitchen floor when you've never redone yours, and especially not if your floor is a complete mess. If you did, you would be rightly considered a bit of a jerk. However, if you have redone your floors and understand how challenging that process is, you'll be much wiser and much better equipped to help someone in their own process and probably be more gracious and understanding in how you speak. I'll sum it up this way. We don't always know what's happening in someone else's kitchen or what process God has them going through. So be gracious. Make allowances for each other's faults. Our life is imperfect, and the roads in Michigan aren't the only thing under construction. We are too. Well, thanks so much for joining us today on Equipped in Grace. We hope that this episode, though brief, has been a blessing to you and your walk with Jesus. And if it has, then we'd love to see you back for our next episode, or we invite you to check out any of the content we've already posted. New episodes of Equipped in Grace are posted every Wednesday. So until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.